What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another Euro 2024 fantasy video. In this one, I'm going to discuss the wildcard for the quarterfinals. So a quick discussion about whether or not you should use the chip or whether it might be better to save it for the semi-finals, and then I'll go through the draft itself. So if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and let's get into it. So I just want to start with a little bit of strategy chat, because some of you are probably wondering whether to even use the wildcard in the quarterfinals or to perhaps save it until the semi-finals instead. And for those of you that are definitely activating the chip, how many players do you have from each team? What's the strategy there? So let's start with whether to use the chip this week. I've kind of come to the conclusion that we've got 3 free transfers between the round of 16 and the quarterfinals. And if you can get to 14 or 15 players with those transfers that are still in the tournament, that's probably enough to save your wildcard no matter which players you've got. And the reason for that, the quarterfinals are quite hard to call about who's going to go through. So you've got Spain versus Germany, Portugal versus France, England versus Switzerland, Netherlands versus Turkey. If I had to put all my money on one team getting through, it'd probably be Netherlands. I think they're the biggest favourites out of all the matches. The rest of them is really difficult. Like, I'd love to say that England are definitely going to beat Switzerland, but the way the two teams have played so far in this tournament, nobody, including nearly every England fan, would be surprised if Switzerland won. Spain, I think, have probably played the best in this tournament. But Germany are the host. They're not going to be pushovers. They could go through. And I think if any of these games could be more boring than an England one, it's going to be Portugal versus France. I think that's going to be super low scoring. You just never know who's going to go through. My money would be on France, but I would not be surprised if Portugal won. So the problem is, when you wildcard, you need to go all in on some team. So I suspect for most people it would be like 4 to 5 Netherlands players. I'd probably go a little bit heavy on England, but probably not the full 5. And then a couple of other players mixed in. But if Turkey were to beat Netherlands, you're suddenly going through to the semi-finals with 4 transfers and you've lost 5 players. And you might have lost a couple of other players elsewhere. Now, as you get further into the tournament, like semi-finals and final, it's not as important to have 15 playing players. But if you can, you still want it. Like, you at least want a bench, right, for the semi-finals, because you're going to have the opportunity to switch. So I think for most people, if you can get to 14 or 15 players, I would probably hold the wild card, unless you've got, I don't know, like 10 terrible picks somehow. But I really doubt that is the case for most people who are engaged. If you are using the chip, how many players do you have from each team? Somewhere along the line, you've got to back someone, right? You can't really go kind of 2 or 3 players from each team, because obviously 4 of them are going to get knocked out and you're going to only have 4 transfers to deal with it. So personally, I would go for 5 Netherlands, like I've just said. I would go, that's the full amount you can have, right? 5 is the max you can have in the quarterfinals. I'd probably go for 3. Personally, I'd back England, right? But if you want to back whoever you think is going to win out of England or Switzerland, I'd probably go for at least 3 players from. And then the rest, I would just have a mix, like 1 or 2 from each of the other countries, and that should be enough to see you over the line. If Netherlands go out, a lot of people are going to be in a difficult situation, but that's why I quite like saving the wild card to the quarterfinals. So that's how I would play it, and that's what I've done in the draft I'm going to talk about. So let's go through it. So let's take a look at the defensive players. For my 2 goalkeepers, I've got Maignan from France, who plays on the first day, and then Verbruggen from the Netherlands, who plays on the second day. So if France don't get a clean sheet, or Maignan doesn't get enough saves, penalty saves, whatever it might be, then I'll obviously move it to Verbruggen, and I am expecting the Netherlands to go through to the semi-final. So hopefully I'll have at least 1 goalkeeper for the next round with this strategy. For what it's worth, by the way, because I know people will mention it, of course, Turkey could go through instead. They're not going to fear the Netherlands. They are going to come out to play, as we saw against Austria yesterday. But at some point, you've got to back a team with more players. You can't just have a couple from each, as I've already said. So Verbruggen is my second goalkeeper. And I just think that as much as France haven't played that well so far in the tournament, Portugal haven't been electric either. I do think it'll be low scoring. And we've seen France in these kind of games plenty of times before just nick something with Mbappe or whoever it might be. And so that's why I've gone for Maignan over one of the other goalkeepers like Neuer, Simon, or Costa, if I can remember the other ones. And by the way, for the semi-finals, if you are using your wild card this week, the same teams will play on the same day, right? So whoever gets through from Spain, Germany, Portugal, France will play on the first day. And then the second day will be England, Switzerland, Netherlands, Turkey, whoever gets through from that game. So potentially I could have both goalkeepers if France and Netherlands win. In terms of some of the more value players, Cucurella looks probably like the best option from Spain. I was going to say 4.5 million, but I just need to double check to see if he's gone up in price because there was some price changes. No, he's still 4.5. So I think he's the best option from Spain. I haven't gone for a Germany defender. Obviously, Mittelstadt didn't play the last game, so there's rotation worries in that position. Rudiger's quite expensive as well. I expect Tar to come back in, but Schlotterbeck didn't play that well. Didn't play that badly. And so I think I'm just going to ignore Germany defence. The one thing to say is Spain-Germany is the first game, so we will know before the deadline. So if you really want a Germany defender, you can wait for the lineup and then go for it. But I think right now I've gone for Cucurella. I think Pepe from Portugal is arguably the best defender. I'd be surprised if... Well, actually, I wouldn't be that surprised because they're playing France. I'm a little surprised Cancelo's not had an attack and return yet. I actually thought for maybe 50, 60 minutes in the last game, he actually played pretty well. But Pepe for recoveries is just an absolute monster. And he's only 5 million as well. So he's in there. He's my only Portugal player in this team. And then I've got 2 Netherlands defenders. So Ake and De Vrij. De Vrij is only 5 million. Ake is 5.5. So they're both cheaper than Van Dijk. And I think De Vrij did really well for ball recoveries in the last game. He definitely did better than Van Dijk did, who wasn't great at all, to be honest, in terms of ball recoveries, that is. Let me just see. Oh, yeah, that's for the whole tournament. 9 ball recoveries in the last game against Romania, and I'm sure they'll have plenty of opportunity to do that again against Turkey. So I think he looks like pretty good value. So it is a triple up on the Netherlands defence. Do I like triple ups? Not necessarily. I'd probably rather spread the risk a little bit more. But I just don't think there's 3 attacking players that I can really fit in. So that's where I've gone for the majority of my Netherlands players. And then my final defender is John Stones from England. Now, ideally, Gay wouldn't be suspended and you go for him because he's only 4.5 and he's fantastic for ball recoveries, or at least has been so far. But he is suspended and there's no chance that whoever comes in for him, which will probably be Konza, that they will keep their place for the semi-final. So if England were to beat Switzerland, Gay will come back in. So I think you've just got to ignore those players. Trippier came off with an injury, so I'm not even sure if he's going to start the next game. Plus he's 6 million. So it's got to be Stones or Walker. And for this draft, I've just gone for the cheaper player. I do have 1.9 million in the bank, but there is a chance that I will need that money to upgrade one of my attackers, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is why I don't want to spend too much more on defensive players. Just a couple of other names to mention, though. You could go for Cancelo if you think he's going to get an attack and return against France. Dumfries was quite attacking in the last game against Romania, and I think overall Netherlands played really well. I don't think there'll be a huge amount of changes, so him instead of Ake could be an option. There's not really a huge amount of attacking defenders for England, and to be honest with you, I'm not expecting... I wouldn't expect Trent to come in or something like that. I think there should be changes for what it's worth for the England fullbacks, which I won't get into massively, but I don't think there necessarily will be. And obviously Theo Hernandez for France, I really like. Whoever plays left back for Germany could be an option too, but I quite like that setup. I think you're back in the Netherlands to get something against Turkey in terms of a clean sheet. Goalkeepers look good. Verbruggen's good value. Overall, pretty solid. So these are my 5 midfielders. I've got Musiala and Sane from Germany for the double up on their attack. For my England midfielder, I've gone for Bellingham again. Is Nico Williams from Spain, and then Xavi Simons from Netherlands. Now, if I was wildcarding this week, and I am going to discuss whether I'm going to use the chip in tomorrow's team selection video, I'd be pretty happy with 4 out of 5 of these picks. I think Musiala is probably one of, if not the most exciting player to watch at this tournament. There's loads of great young players. Jamal, obviously, as well, which a lot of people have spoken about. But Musiala is incredible. I think he will start for Germany. Again, we will get the lineup, so it doesn't really matter. But he's pretty much going to be in. I really want a second England attacker, despite the fact they haven't scored a huge amount of goals at the tournament. Bellingham is absolutely nailed on. I thought, to be honest with you, like a lot of people, he didn't play that well again up until the goal. But that is why Gareth Southgate left him on. And yes, he did get substituted eventually in extra time when they were defending the 2-1 lead. But he's just not going to be out of that team. And he's not going to be subbed early. And I think for Foden and Saka, that could happen at some point. And again, if there's going to be a change in that England team, it might be on the left for Gordon instead of Foden. I don't think it's very likely for what it's worth, but it could happen. Bellingham will be in that team, however, and we know where he's going to play, right? So he would be my England midfielder of choice. Again, you don't have to go for England players. Like if you think that Switzerland are definitely going to win, then I'd probably take out some of these England players and put Swiss players in instead, like Vargas, for example, who's also a lot cheaper and would allow you to spend money elsewhere. I think Nico Williams is my favourite option for Spain. They do have Ruiz and Rodri, who are a bit more defensive, but they are good for ball recoveries, can get attacking returns as well, like we've seen. But I think Williams is just so exciting. Obviously, Jamal is listed as a forward, so I can't go for him. And then Xavi Simons he played really well yesterday. I think he only got 1 assist. A lot of people have asked me why he didn't get the second one. In this game, they don't count assists where basically a player goes on a long run and scores. So Simons did pass to Marlon for I think it was the 3rd goal, but it was inside his own half, and then Marlon ran the rest of the pitch and scored. They just don't count them. That's just how the rules work. But overall, he was good. The one thing I will say about him from watching that match yesterday, like if I owned him in fantasy for the round of 16, I'll be so frustrated. There's a few chances in the box. He had to shoot earlier. He just didn't do it. Took too many touches, and then the chance was gone. But he is getting into good positions, and he is good value. So I think he would be in as well. The only player I'm not sure about is Sané. One, because I'm not 100% sure he's going to start. He played well in the last game, but maybe Wirtz comes back in. Again, that doesn't really matter because you'll see the lineup. But I think there's other good options. Like I'd be quite tempted if you're sure that England are going to go through against Switzerland, I'd be tempted to have Saka instead. Like 3 England attackers, because spoiler alert, Kane is in this team, doesn't seem great when they've only scored 2 goals in the last round and maximum of 1 before that. But if you think they're going to go through, it might be worth having someone like Saka instead of Sané, and you can afford it. I can't quite afford to go to a Bruno Fernandes. I'd be 0.3 million short with my setup. But again, if you could save money elsewhere, that could be an option as well. But I think going for whoever starts out of Sané and Wirtz is quite nice. And it also splits the risk a little bit. If England go out and Germany go through, you've got one less England player to worry about. And you've got the German attacker already there. And it might be that Sané starts the quarterfinal and Wirtz starts the semi-final. But I think it's worth taking a risk on whoever that might be. The good thing about someone like Saka and Fernandes or even Bernardo Silva is they're going to start. Whatever happens, they will be in that 11. You don't quite know that with the Germany attacker, but also they're pretty good. So I'd maybe be willing to take a risk on that. But Simons, Williams, Bellingham, Musiala, I'd be pretty happy with. It's just that final spot. I mean, you could go for a punt on a Turkey player, like Güler, for example. Played really well. Çalhanoğlu will be back as well. But I think that's the way that I would go. Let's talk about the forwards. Basically, Kane +2. So alongside Harry Kane, it's Gakpo and Mbappe, and I'm pretty sure if I was wildcarding this week, that is the front 3 that I would go for. There are other options to consider as well, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I think with Kane, it's just keeping that little bit of faith with England. They are still favourites for that game. I get it, right? They have played terribly. I think most of us who support England are not really expecting it to just click into place now. So maybe Kane is just a bit expensive, and if you want to go for someone cheaper, you absolutely can. But he is their main goal threat. He is on penalties. We know he very rarely gets substituted. He's definitely going to start. I would still have him in, I think. Gakpo's obviously already got 3 goals at this tournament. He also scored 3 goals at the World Cup as well. He seems to be the Netherlands' main attacking threat. I will say, though, don't completely rule out Memphis Depay instead. He hasn't scored as many goals, I get that, but he's on all set pieces. He took all corners, free kicks in yesterday's game. I'm pretty sure he's going to be on penalties as well. I know there was a lot of discussion from myself as well about Van Dijk taking penalties. That was mentioned by Koeman, I think, at the end of last year. But Depay was injured at the time, and he has taken penalties before. So I think he would take them if he was on the pitch. And he could be a bit more of a differential over someone like Gakpo. But I know that most people would pick Gakpo, and I think that's a fair choice. He has looked good. He does like to shoot, so he's in. And then Mbappe hasn't exactly been electric so far, neither of France. But if they're going to score, he's usually at the centre of that. And I do think they've got a good chance to advance to the next round. He's on penalties as well. He will get chances, even against that Portugal team, who will probably sit in a little bit. So he would be in as well. But there are other players to consider. I think Spain versus Germany is interesting because I think it's perfectly reasonable to say it's hard to know who's going to get through. But also it could be quite an attacking match. I think when you get further into the knockouts, even the most attacking teams will sit in at times. But I don't think Spain will do that much. And if that's going to happen, Germany have got the players to be able to counter, and they will attack as well. They're the home nation after all. So someone like Havertz or Morata could be a decent option. From what we know now, Havertz is probably on penalties as well. Like, he's taken both of them, right? So he's not going to suddenly go back to Gundogan. That was obviously wrong, the information that we thought, and I thought as well earlier in the tournament. So Havertz could be a nice cheap option. But also, I just think Mbappe, Gakpo and Kane are more likely to get through than either Morata or Havertz. Obviously, one of Morata or Havertz has to get through to the next round, but it's difficult to know. So I'd probably ignore both. I don't think there's much justification for Ronaldo over any of the three forwards that I've gone for. He's still getting chances, by the way, and obviously was very emotional in the last game, and I'm sure he'll start the next one as well. And he'll probably still be on penalties despite missing. It was a good save from Oblak. Again, I just don't think he's better than any of the other options. If you think Switzerland are going to beat England quite easily, then Mbolo's an option, but he does tend to come off early. Obviously, he was back from injury at the start of this tournament, but he could be good. And then Turkey, I just personally wouldn't go there. So that's the three for me. I think if I was going to put anyone else in, it would maybe be Havertz, possibly Ronaldo. Like, I'd never completely rule him out, but I quite like how that looks. So I think that's a pretty solid team. All in on Netherlands with 5 players. I've got 3 from England, Kane, Bellingham and Stones, and then a couple of other players from other teams just to spread the risk a little bit. 1.9 in the bank, which if Sané starts could be used elsewhere. But you don't have to spend the money, right? Because if we get through to the semi-finals and you need that cash for an upgrade because someone you weren't expecting has gone out, like Cucurella, for example, it might be that in the next round you want a 5 or a 5.5 million defender instead. And so you've got that money in the back. I don't think there's massive reason to use it with this team. Like, is Van Dijk massively better than De Vrij or Ake? Not really, I would say. Is Cancelo massively better than Pepe because with ball recoveries and stuff like that? Not really. So I think you can bank the money. So that's what I've gone for. I know it's still heavy-ish on England. I'm still going to back them ahead of Switzerland. Again, if you think Switzerland are better, go for 3 of their players like Vargas, Mbolo, etc. instead of 3 England. I'll leave it there. Tomorrow we'll have team selection. If I've got enough questions for final thoughts, I will do that on Friday as well, ahead of the deadline. But team selection definitely tomorrow. If you've enjoyed that, give it a like, hit that subscribe button, rate 5 stars on podcast, and I'll catch you again then. Or tomorrow, I should say. See ya.